Welcome, and in this video we're going to take a look at AWS Amplify. AWS Amplify is a service in AWS that allows you to easily deploy web applications. Now, I've been studying for the AWS exams, and this was a service that I found while I was doing that. What AWS allows you to do is actually connect AWS to a GitHub repository, and it makes it very easy to basically deploy code, and when you make a change to the code, it automatically rebuilds your application. So we're going to use a React app, and we're going to deploy that on AWS Amplify by using GitHub. So I'm going back into my console, and I'm going to create a folder where I'm going to deploy this. I'm just going to call this AWS Amplify test. And I'm going to create a React application. Okay, so while this is building out, let's go back into the browser. And we can find the AWS Amplify in under all services. And then if we go to mobile, so here you have AWS Amplify. And it's basically a very easy way to set things up. You literally connect it to a GitHub repository, and then it automatically, whenever you have a new commit, it then rebuilds it. So this very much feels similar to other tools such as Netlify and Zeit Now, which also allow you with like one push to GitHub to automatically deploy your code. So I really enjoy using those tools, so I wanted to see how AWS Amplify does that, and if it's as easy as Now and Netlify. So we first also need to create a repository. So on GitHub, I'm going to call this AWS Amplify test. I am going to remove this, so let's call this test 2. Why not? Testing AWS Amplify. I'm going to remove this afterwards, so don't look for it. So once we create the repository, let's have a look at, yeah, there we go. This is also created, that's great. So we can open it in VS Code. And what we'll then see is that I'm using React. It's the latest version as of today. And yeah, so this will basically, we're going to commit this whole application to GitHub. So what I tend to do is I just follow the instructions here. So we need to git init and then git add all. So let's do git init, git add all, and then we need to commit it. So if we say git commit, we can call this first commit, doesn't really matter. Then we're gonna add the remote origin, which is this GitHub repository. So that means whenever you push something to GitHub, it will go to this location. And after that, we need to set up the master branch. Okay, so that means that the Amplify will then also read from this master one. So now I'm going to push this to AWS, to GitHub. And let's hop back. So if we refresh this page, what we'll see is that we now have a repository. That's great. So now let's connect AWS Amplify to this particular repository. So I'm going to the console, and in here I'm going to click on Get Started with Deploy. And what we're going to select is we're going to select GitHub here. You can also select Bitbucket, GitLab, other source code tools. So if I click on Continue, basically I already authorized myself. It's very easy, it's just 2 clicks. You need to put in your password, and there you go. So then I can select the repository that I want to build it from, and then the branch. So you can also select other branches if you want to, if you have a development branch. If I'm now going to hit next, we basically walk through the configuring settings. We don't need to change anything here. So if we hit next, we go to review, and you can see it auto detected that we're using React. So if I hit save and deploy, it's now going to actually create this application. So what it's going to do is actually it's going into GitHub. It's grabbing the code from there. And as you've seen earlier, when I deployed it, I wasn't actually building it out. I had the base code there. So now it's going through the 4 steps. We have the actual provisioning, of the app. It's going to build it. After that, it's going to deploy it, and then it's gonna do some verification. What we'll also see is that we get a URL here. So this URL points at my application. Now I can already see provision has been successful. It was succeeded. It has a green tick, and now it's actually building it out. And this is similar to when you run npm run build in your console, for example, when you want to build it locally. After that, it's going to do the deploying. Now, what you can do with Amplify, at the moment we're doing a React front end. You can also deploy your backend. For that, you need to install the AWS Amplify CLI. But that's also fairly straightforward, and I might have a look at this in a future video. And yeah, so if we go back to the front-end environment, you can see it's now building it out. I think you can actually click on it. Yeah, there we go. So at the moment, we can see this is the domain, and that's a source repository. So I can open this. If I open it in a new tab, we'll see it's going to tell us that something is going to happen here, and that's whenever the app is built. There we go. So it's going to build it out. Normally this takes about a minute or so, depending on how large your application is, of course. Now here you can see the steps as well. So provisioning was successful. The actual build, at the moment it's going through these steps. This is similar to what you see when you run this on your own machine. So the build was successful. There were no tests configured. Deployment is also finished, and now it is running the verification. That's doing it at the moment, but we can probably refresh this page here. And what we then see is this default React application. And this is the URL. You can, of course, modify the URL to look a bit nicer. You can see how easy it is to deploy from GitHub to AWS Amplify. If I now would go back into VS Code, I could make a change here. So I could, for example, go and make a change here, and I can say hello from AWS Amplify. And what that will do is whenever I commit this to GitHub, I then automatically see that being deployed. So it will, of course, take a little bit of time. It's probably the same time as what it took now to build this out, because it needs to provision it, rebuild it, and then deploy. But it's that easy to connect that. Cool. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.